Welcome to episode 95 of the Brainy Business, Understanding the Psychology of Why People Buy. On today's episode, I'll be talking about why our brains are programmed to hate seeing and hearing ourselves on camera and some tips to overcome those biases. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. Today, I'm going to talk to you about why our brains are programmed to hate us being on camera and some tips for what you can do to overcome it. In the world of selfies, Instastories, and YouTube, it's hard not to be on camera these days. And I chose to talk about this now because coronavirus, which I talked about in episode 91 of the podcast, has made it so a great deal of us are working virtually. The world has been flocking to Zoom, which before the end of February had already added more active users than in all of 2019. If you have not yet listened to that episode on coronavirus, I highly recommend it. There's so much going on right now with new announcements every day of countries taking new and important precautions to stop the spread of this disease. That episode talks about why the brain is wired to react the way it does during a novel and frightening situation like this, and why we all feel inclined to hoard lots of supplies like toilet paper, even when we know it's a bit irrational. If you want to listen to and share that episode, there is a link to it within the show notes for this episode, which you can find at thebrainybusiness.com/95 or right in the app you're listening to. While you're there, you'll also find a link to one of my recent articles in Inc. magazine about how to communicate with your coworkers and employees during coronavirus to help calm their fears. I know a lot of people have found that article to be very valuable, and another that came out April 1st on how to do deep work that has been incredibly popular as well. If you're already on the Brainy Business list, you get direct links to everything related to each episode, as well as access to the super secret subscriber page with all the freebies. If you want to be on the list, simply sign up for any freebie, including the Master Your Mindset mini course, which I'll talk about a little bit throughout the episode, and you'll be automatically added. Those in the States can sign up easily by texting the word Brainy, BRAINY, to 33777. You'll be automatically added to the list and get a free copy of my ebook as a thank you. Before jumping into the episode, I want to take a moment to thank A. Seckler or A.S. Eckler for your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts titled Love It, which reads, "Friend turned me on to this podcast last week. I've listened to the first 9 episodes in 7 days and plan to listen to them all. Great at 1.5 times while cooking or in the car. Thanks, Melina, for all the great content, real life examples, and witty insights you provide." Thank you for the awesome review and for having me with you while cooking or on the car radio. It's nice to know I'm sort of socializing with people during this time of social, or now I think they're saying we should call it physical distancing. I know it may take you a while to get to this episode, even though you're binging them at more than one a day at this rate. But when you do hear this, please send me an email, melina@thebrainybusiness.com, so I can give you a proper shout out on a future episode. And to all of you listening, please do continue to post those 5-star ratings and reviews. I appreciate them all, and they help others to find the show and know it's going to be a fit for them. There are a few more that have come in recently, so I will be sharing those in shoutouts on the show soon. And if you leave your review, you might just hear your name on a future episode as well. All right. Now, let's talk about why our brains are wired to hate being on camera. Not too long ago, any of us who wanted to could pretty much avoid cameras, either video or photos. I'm pretty sure there are less than half a dozen photos of my dad from my entire childhood. That was clearly by design. He was never one to be the center of attention or within 10 yards of it if he could avoid it. Me? While I've been on a lot of stages and performed as an actor, vocalist, ballerina, and now podcaster for most of my life, my inclination is to clam up when put on the spot, perfectionism setting in, a mindset issue I've dealt with my whole life. And as I said earlier, I've linked to some of the mindset episodes and the free Master Your Mindset mini course in the show notes for you. I remember auditioning for a solo in 4th grade. We each got to go in one at a time if we wanted to audition and perform solo for the music teacher. And then she had everyone sit around in a circle, the entire class, all the 4th graders, listen to everyone's performance as a class to vote for the best one who got the solo, which is crazy. I know. I think it was actually even worse, like 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, all the kids in every grade and every class. I was fine singing for the audition, but the idea of having to listen to myself in front of everyone was too much. I ran out of the room, fingers in my ears, to not have to listen to it, which is embarrassing to think back on. Made it so much worse and ridiculous. And then people are talking about it, whereas if I would have just stayed in the room and cringed a little, it would have been fine. Anyway, the first time I sang the national anthem publicly, I told my parents they couldn't go because I knew I would freeze if I saw them. Thankfully, they snuck in and out the back so they could hear it and make sure I wouldn't see them. Funny enough, I just had to stop recording for a second because Aaron came downstairs and I was reminded that I often actually make him go, I say, like, I'm going to be recording now. I need you to go be on the other side of the house and maybe you should have your headphones on because I can't record knowing that you can hear me recording, which is super dumb. But true, weird things that happen. And as far as camera goes, I've always been sensitive to seeing myself on camera. Weight is something I've been concerned about my entire life. And knowing the camera adds 10 pounds or what sometimes feels like 50, it can just be painful. All this is to say, I get it. After years of voice lessons and having to listen to tapes of myself singing opera or chamber or jazz music, to now having to listen to myself for up to an hour every week for the podcast. Yes, I do listen to every single episode in full to approve them and make sure there aren't errors, and doing Facebook Lives or the videos for my courses and all my work with clients over Zoom, which I've been doing for years before it was mandated by social distancing. It's taken a lot of practice, and I still do get anxious when it comes to doing some videos. I don't do nearly as much social media content as I should because the idea of going live for Instastories or on Facebook is often less than appealing, and I'm generally comfortable with myself on camera now. So I just want you to know I get it. And I want to help everyone understand some of the things going on in all of our brains that make us less than excited about seeing ourselves on video or listening to our own voices on a recording to make it a little easier to do that next one and the one after that and the one after that. There are a couple of mind tricks conspiring against seeing and hearing yourself on camera, including confirmation bias, familiarity bias, and the comparison effect or relativity for our purposes. And we will also revisit the focusing illusion. Remember, everything that has a past episode will be linked for you in the show notes at thebrainybusiness.com/95. There are also some links to articles that were used as a resource for this episode in case you want to check them out. I want to start with familiarity bias. This is one of those things that is so obvious when you hear it, but not something people are usually connecting the dots on themselves. A very obvious smack your head type of moment. Think about looking at your best friend, your partner, your child, sister, whomever. Everyone you look at, you're seeing correctly as they are. Actors in our favorite movies, we see them head on, so to speak. And logically, this is how everyone else sees you as well. They're looking at you across the dinner table over a glass of wine or went out for a walk, talking directly to your face while you look back at them. Now, how do you see yourself? When can you see your own face? The only way is by looking into a mirror, which, as we know, is a reflection. So you see the opposite of what everyone else sees. If we all had perfectly symmetrical faces, that wouldn't matter. We would look exactly the same in the mirror as when someone looked right at our face. But as we know, most of us are not perfectly symmetrical, and so when traditional cameras and old school videos take our image, we see ourselves as looking totally off, and everyone else is looking good because we're not used to seeing ourselves head on. Our familiarity bias kicks in and says, something's wrong there, and dislikes that image. The brain wants to know what's coming and likes things it's comfortable and familiar with. It has been trained that the mirror image of you is what you truly look like. And so even when your friends tell you you look awesome in the picture, you just can't get past the feeling that you look weird, wrong, off, gross, whatever. Our brains can be real jerks to themselves, by the way, but you probably knew that. Studies have actually found that when you show people two different images, one that's head on and one that's a mirror image of themselves and of others, to see what people preferred, it confirmed that friends and partners, everyone else prefers the straight on image of us, and we all prefer our own mirror images. The study found that people could never explain why they didn't like one and why they preferred the mirror image. They just knew they preferred one to the other. The conscious can't explain it, but the subconscious knows what it's used to looking at, what it's familiar with, and will always prefer that. In one of the articles I linked to, it shows some famous faces like Harrison Ford, as we are used to seeing him, and his mirror image, which looks super weird and off to all of us. And that can help give you an idea of how this would be the case for absolutely everyone. The lesson? Until you train your brain to seeing your real face more, it will not be familiar and it will feel off. This means putting in the effort to be in more pictures and on video and watching yourself. And you may not have realized it, but some smart systems like Zoom actually let you choose if you want to be looking at and recording your real face or your mirror image. I'm pretty sure the default setting is now to mirror image to help people be more comfortable right off the bat with seeing themselves. Facebook Live does this as well. So those programmers are already taking steps to help you be more comfortable with what you see. But know that if you see a group picture someone took and you think you look weird and everyone else says you look great, accept that they are right. And really look at the best features to take them in. Help train your brain to get familiar with the good stuff of the true you and your mirror image. Be your own hype man or woman to help your brain get familiar with the concept. And remember the focusing illusion, which was episode 89 of the podcast. Our brains dial in way too closely on things when we are thinking about them. It makes them into way too big a deal. When you're watching you on video, you are focusing in on the tiniest things, the way your mouth moved when you pronounced that word, or how weird your nose is, or that hair that's a bit out of place. You will be focusing on yourself in a way no one else does. So you have two options. First, train yourself to watch the general image and try not to narrow in on one specific item. That can be hard to do at first, but it is possible. You will want to make sure you really know your material so you can get into more of a flow state and let the video wash over you as if you were watching a video on YouTube. And think about how you watch videos. Do you zero in on one tiny flaw the whole time? For some people, the answer might actually be yes. And if you do that when you're looking at other people, you definitely probably don't want to try this tactic on yourself, and maybe just, try to look at the more general image for everybody. But in most cases, we don't judge others as harshly as we do ourselves. So if you can train yourself to think about that image as if it was someone other than you, it might be able to help you to get over that focusing illusion and looking at the worst things. The second option, and this is actually the one I recommend, is to know that the focusing illusion is still going to be happening because your brain is wired to focus on stuff. It just does that. So instead of allowing it to dwell and focus on your worst features or the things you think are wrong or weird, Focus on what makes you look and feel amazing. If you hate your nose but know you have great eyes, focus on your eyes while you're talking and make them look their absolute best. And while this may sound like a tip for women in a makeup commercial, this is a tip for everyone. You have things about you and your environment that you do like and things you don't. If you don't like being on camera but can look at those positive things instead, do it. Focusing on the good stuff will make you happier, smile more, and the video will go smoother. Then you'll start getting compliments and positive feedback, and it gets easier and you're familiar with the process and all is great. One other pro tip about Zoom is that it has a touch up my appearance option that gives you a smoothed out look and can be the edge you need to feel more comfortable. Find that in the settings for Zoom. Now, as a last resort, if you know you want and need to do video but can't bear to look at yourself, there are options to cover your face so people can see you, but you can't see you. I know people who have put sticky notes over the screen where their face shows up on their own computer to not get distracted. That's an option, but I recommend you try the other methods first. Really give them a go because it creates a better experience for the person or people you're speaking to when you're able to interact in that way where you know that you look good and you feel good about the video. And before I transition to the next bias, I do want to make a note about the audio piece, which is just as important as video in many cases, even though a lot of people don't talk about it. Do you remember the first time you heard your voice recorded on an answering machine or a tape? How many of us said something like, "Ugh, is that what I really sound like?" And other people say, yeah, that's you. We can't believe it. Something must be wrong. We know we don't sound like that weird baby voice coming through the speakers. So what's happening? Well, just like how we see ourselves in a mirror image, we actually hear ourselves differently than everyone else because our voices are reverberating around inside our heads while we speak. Your mouth is closer to your ears than anybody else when you're talking, and it causes us to hear our own words, our voices differently than other people who hear us when they aren't inside of our own heads. In that way, listening to your recorded voice has that same familiarity bias issue as seeing yourself on a camera. I remember in my high school choir when my director used to have us put our hands up in front of our ears, like if you were pretending to make like a fish face with those hands as your fins, in case you've ever done that with your kids. When you talk like that, where your hands are acting as a wall between your mouth and your ears, the sound has to travel around the hands to get into the ear, and you're closer to what you actually sound like. The lesson here is that your perception of yourself is biased. You do not see or hear yourself the same way as anyone else, and trying to shift and just sort of accept when everyone else says that it's good and normal and that's what you look and sound like and that's good and what they're used to and it's a positive thing is a big mindset shift to move past. And I'll wrap that up again at the end of the episode. Next, I want to talk about how familiarity bias combines with confirmation bias to really reinforce the bad stuff deeper into your brain. Whatever you think is wrong with you on camera or in real life, your confirmation bias is looking for cues that support that opinion. If you think you're awkward or that you aren't good enough, and then you stumble through a line, your brain will latch onto that to show you how awful you are. Forget the 29 minutes and 45 seconds of good stuff. That one slip up is what you will remember and dwell on and use to remind yourself why you shouldn't do video. Studies have found that we remember the feedback that aligns with our self-esteem more than we remember anything that doesn't align with it. So, if you have a low opinion of yourself on video or in front of crowds, your brain will block out anything that supports the opposite of that you can do a great presentation, and continually reinforce and only take in and remember the bad feedback that aligns with your perception going in. And our brains are really good at asking questions in a way that will get to the support they are looking for. Consider the type of questions you ask from others when you're trying to get feedback on a video that you've done. If you're comfortable with yourself, you might not even ask. But if you did want feedback on this video, your question could be, what did you think? What did you learn? Is there anything to add or take out for the next time around? Someone who isn't comfortable with themselves on camera and is in the confirmation bias negative cycle could ask slightly but significantly different questions like, did you hear when I messed up about halfway through? Do you think anyone noticed? And if the person you ask says they didn't see it or notice, you'll probably shake it off and say, they're just being nice. There's no way they didn't notice. I can't believe they can't just be honest with me. And you'll probably keep asking until you find someone who says, yeah, I did notice that. That was kind of weird to validate what you've been looking for. Again, that's your brain using its confirmation bias to stick with its version of the truth, focusing on what it wants to see and filtering out the millions of possible data points per second that are flying around that don't validate that opinion. Remember, your subconscious is making 99% of the decisions and evaluating tons of information every second to screen out what fits its rules and what doesn't, and determining what makes it to the conscious brain for processing. The subconscious can do 11 million bits of information per second compared to the measly 40 bits of the conscious brain. That means for every item that makes it through to the conscious, 275,000 others were passed over by the subconscious. And it likes to be right, so it doesn't often let things through that go against its convention or plan. The tip for you here is to find something else to tell yourself and repeat it a lot. I have linked to episode 67 on how to get and stay motivated, which digs in deeper on this. But the thing to note is that you can't just change the negative and say, I don't do that now, when you're giving yourself something to focus on. So if you're used to saying, I'm bad on camera, or I look weird on video, or I hate pictures of myself, you can't make it the negative and just start saying, I am not bad on camera, or I do not look weird on video. You need to take it a step further and make the new positive that you want to embrace, and know it will take some time to sink in. You've been telling yourself this bad stuff for a really long time, so you need to invest some time into the new positive that you want to use. This needs to be whatever you can say that you can begin to believe. That's where to start. Going straight to, I love myself on camera, or I look amazing in every way, might be too extreme for your brain to believe at first and may never take hold because you can't get behind the thing that you're saying. Instead, saying something like, people don't care what I look like. They're here for this information. They can't get anywhere else. Could be enough. Or maybe authenticity is valuable, or it's just like a networking group if you're great in person but hate video. Remember, even if you think you look weird on video because you aren't a mirror image or don't like your voice or whatever, other people, your friends and family and peers and clients, are seeing you this way all the time, and they like you and want to spend time with you. Your clients like meeting with you in person. Your employees are used to seeing you across the desk. This is normal for them, and it can become normal and positive for you as well with a little effort. In addition to the episodes on being motivated and focusing illusion, I've also linked to an article I wrote for Inc. with tips to help people who dread going to work to change their mindset. The tips there definitely coincide with these video tips and are going to be very helpful for you, especially number 5. The next brain bias to keep in mind is the comparison effect, which for our purposes is essentially relativity. The context, the environment you were just in, will impact the way your brain perceives the next item. Starting off a sales pitch with the lowest prices and working your way up will make the middle number seem high, while starting high and working your way down makes it feel like a deal. Similarly, consider this experiment, which you can probably understand well enough as a thought experiment to not have to physically do it yourself, but it would be easy enough to try at home if you want. And for all of us with kids at home with extended school closures for coronavirus, this could be a fun science experiment to do with them. Imagine there are 3 bowls of water in front of you. The one on the right is hot, not boiling, but uncomfortably hot against your skin. The middle bowl is tepid, basically room temperature, and the last bowl, the one on the left, is filled with ice water. You're instructed to place your right hand in the hot water bowl and your left hand in the ice water bowl for 45 seconds. Then you take them both out and put them in the middle bowl of room temperature water at the same time. Does it feel the same on both hands? Of course not. It feels cold on your right hand that was just submerged in uncomfortably hot water, and it feels very warm or even hot to the icy left hand. You know the water is the same temperature, but the experience is completely different because of the environment each hand came from immediately preceding going into that water. What in the world does this have to do with video, you may be asking? Well, if you are looking at a bunch of dolled up perfect videos on social media before you start your own with professionals that have had their makeup done and are coached on how to perfectly stand and act and whatnot, you are basically dousing yourself in hot water before you do your own video and feel tepid by comparison. If you are particularly sensitive to your appearance, don't do any scrolling through social before starting your own video because it will be setting you up to see yourself as looking worse than if you hadn't. And even though it shouldn't matter and people like authenticity in videos these days, consider doing your makeup and wearing your favorite outfit or getting a professional light or having an external camera that can capture you at the best angle. If video is important to your business, invest in making yourself look as good as possible. This will benefit your personal brand and make it easier to see yourself as you get more familiar with the process and it becomes a habit. You may also want to consider if you have a favorite painting that is on brand and not too busy, or an image that could be directly behind you so you can see it on the camera while you're talking. That could be something you could focus on that might make you smile. That could be saying a little bit of something about you and help you just be more comfortable while you're talking. Again, something that makes you feel good that will boost you up a little bit while you're talking. Before I launched the Brainy Business Podcast, I went live every day on Facebook for a month to build excitement. It was one of those things I promised and then thought, why did I think this was a good idea? The funny thing is, I decided to launch the podcast while at an in-person mastermind day with Natalie Ekdahl of the Biz Chicks podcast, of which I was just a guest on last week. That's a bucket list moment there, episode 413 of Biz Chicks, which is linked for you in the show notes. So that was on Saturday, May 19th, 2018. The day before, we had found out our offer was accepted on the house we live in now, and we moved in late June. So on May 19th, I decided to completely shift my business, rebrand, and start the podcast while we had to go through the process of moving to our new house. And, I had to learn how to record and launch a podcast. Before the end of the month, I picked and announced the launch of the Brainy Business Podcast as July 5th to be ready for an event I was attending the following week. And in mid-June, I started this live everyday commitment. For the first few videos, I was very focused on making them as perfect as possible, multiple takes and concerned about how I looked and exactly what I said. And then while we were moving, I did some of those in real life videos where I was kind of sweaty and my hair was a total mess. I remember doing a quick video on my phone saying, Erin thinks I'm grabbing the last box and putting on my shoes, but I promised I'd go live today. So here I am for a quick minute before I grab that box. Those videos where I thought I looked ridiculous, and a photo I posted on Instagram when I got back from visiting the Texas A&M Human Behavior Lab last year with the hashtag of Crazy Hair Day was one of my most liked photos at the time. I've linked to it in the show notes to share what my hair honestly looks like on most days if you're curious. So just know those times when you feel off and gross or weird or different, other people don't have that same opinion. They love what they're looking at, and people like to have that tie of authenticity to you. And I'm going to bring this home in my second tip for how you can ignore the way that your brain hates seeing you on camera to move forward. Now that we know a little bit about these biases of familiarity, confirmation, the comparisons that are working to make your brain hate seeing and hearing itself from the outside looking in, I'm going to summarize just a few tips from someone who has had to get comfortable with being on stage, video, and listening to my own voice a lot. And I'm to the point where, for the most part, I'm good with it now. So, first tip for you, remember the focusing illusion and try to focus on good stuff you like about yourself instead of the stuff that makes you cringe. Number 2, to make this easier to take in, know that studies have found that while we think taking a selfie of ourselves, that mirror image we love, it makes us think that we're showing our best selves to the world in the most awesome way. It turns out that anyone else looking at those pictures will rate us as more attractive, likable, and less narcissistic when someone else has taken a photo versus when we take them ourselves. So, people are programmed to like you more when they see you the way they're used to seeing you. People like authenticity, crazy hair, and all. Number 3, reframe your focus to a positive. Instead of, I hate myself on camera, to, people will be excited to get this information from me. Tip 4, be okay with mess ups. They will happen. You'll mispronounce a word or stumble through a line you usually nail. Laugh it off and move on. Don't dwell. People appreciate the moments when you keep going. Trust me, I've had all sorts of stuff happen. The first planned live training I had on my Facebook page had a troll that was posting absolutely ridiculous and profane comments at me and everyone else, just on and on and on. There were like 100 of them. I couldn't block them. And finally, a friend was able to step up and make that happen. I made it through the entire planned lesson, even though 15 or 20 minutes of it was just these comments popping up in front of my face the whole time, which was awful. I made it through without reacting to the insanity. So many people responded to me after saying how impressed they were and to make sure I knew they supported me. Crazy stuff happens. Just smile and keep going as best as you can. Number 5, imagine the audience is laughing at the right spots and loving every minute. Webinars and live videos are hard because you can't always hear and see the responses the same way you can in a live room. I'm used to being on stage and having the audience laugh audibly at my jokes or respond so I can gauge the room and feed off of the energy. In a webinar, when the slides are taking up my screen and everyone is on mute and I'm having to assume people are laughing with me and not at me, it can be really difficult and it could be easy to get hung up on all the weird pauses. And when I first started recording for the podcast, it was really rough because, again, I'm sitting by myself in a room and having to pretend like I'm Oprah or Tony Robbins or Brené Brown, whoever you admire. Think of how they could say or do pretty much anything, flub a line, trip on stage, and their audience would support them. The person you're talking to over video, or in this case, audio, feels the same, even if you can't see or hear them. Assume that is true, and it can be. Don't worry about the lack of comments coming in when you do a Facebook Live. We've all been there with the one view that keeps popping in and out. Remember, the video's for people to watch later, and that audience loves you and is hanging on your every word. See yourself through those positive eyes. Tip 6, decide to get over it. So here's the deal. And I talk about this and give tips in that free Master Your Mindset mini course I mentioned that's linked for you in the show notes. It has a worksheet and everything. The best and worst thing about changing your mindset is it's all in your head. If you want to see yourself differently and perceive yourself as better, you have to accept that. Look at yourself differently. Find positive things to focus on and just see yourself better. You have the power to shift your focus. Ignore the points you hate in a video or photo. Accept everyone else saying you look great as the truth. Look for the positives and do it all with a smile until you genuinely enjoy it. It's possible to make this change and not hate seeing or hearing yourself on video. And it's all within your own brain. You've got this. And know that wherever you are, whatever you're working on, you have a fan here who is cheering you on and seeing all the wonderful stuff you're putting out into the world. Tip 7, the final one, take a tip from Nike and just do it. Do as much video as you can as often as possible so you get comfortable and familiar with it like I did when I did that going live every day before my launch. And speaking of which, I think it's time for a new challenge. I have fallen out of the daily video habit because, like I said, it still isn't my favorite thing either. I am human after all. So let's do a pact, a challenge together to go live on social every day for the next month, specifically until May 15th, because that is when episode 100 of the Brainy Business comes out. Oh, I can't believe it's so close. It seems fitting to do another live challenge on the way to this milestone like I did before the launch. So come find me on Facebook and Instagram, where I am the Brainy Biz, B-I-Z, and use the hashtag BeThoughtful, B-E thoughtful, to find me as well. I'll be going live every day between now, April 10th, and May 15th, when episode 100 goes out. Will you do this with me? Let me know on social. You can find me as the Brainy Biz everywhere. So if you want to be going live on Twitter or something, that's fine too. We should just be moving forward and taking steps to get past that awkward, what do I do phase and into the habit phase where it's just normal. The best thing about Instagram stories, a medium that I can admit scared me for a really long time, is that they're only live for 24 hours. So if you put something out there and are worried it looks weird or that you had a flub, it'll be gone in a day. It's a good way to test things out and see what resonates with your audience and get comfortable in a semi-permanent space. Are you with me? I'll see you on the socials. Find me again as the Brainy Biz and use the hashtag BeThoughtful. And don't forget, there are a bunch of links in the show notes to past episodes, those social links, articles, and the BizChicks episode I was just a guest on, and more at thebrainybusiness.com/95. And just like that, episode 95 on why our brains are wired to hate being on camera is done. Next week is an interview with one of my favorite humans on earth, Nikki Rausch. She's the first repeat guest, as she interviewed me when the pricing course first launched. And this time I get to ask the questions. She is certified in neuro-linguistic programming, which she uses to help people be more comfortable with selling. We're going to be talking about tips to make it easy for people to do business with you. You're going to love her insights. Everything she shares is pure gold. So trust me, you don't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Melina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, visit thebrainybusiness.com.